Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone, and welcome to Supercharge Your Operations with Continuous Improvement. My name is Michelle Eisenberg, and I'm a program assistant at the NASDAQ Entrepreneurial Center. And for those of you who may not know, the NASDAQ Center is a nonprofit building a better path for entrepreneurs worldwide by improving inclusion, access, and knowledge in entrepreneurship. So as you will see in the chat in a moment, the NASDAQ Center provides programs, resources, and exceptional mentorship to entrepreneurs across all races, industries, and geographies. So definitely make sure to check out those links and resources in the chat. And then just a couple of housekeeping items before we get started. First, let us know where you are dialing in from in the chat. We always love to connect. And second, we are going to open up for live Q&A at the end of the event. So please make sure to submit your questions for us in that Q&A function at the bottom of your screen throughout the presentation, and we will try our best to get to all of them. And of course, none of what we do could be possible at the center without all of the amazing support from our sponsors, including NASDAQ, Lehigh University, Bank of the West, Airbnb, KPMG, Wilson Sonsini, Woodruff Sawyer, Microsoft Entrepreneurship for Positive Impact, BPM, and HubSpot for Startups. We are humbled by their contributions and hope you are grateful too. And so before we get started, we always like to launch a couple polls just to step back and see how everyone in the room is doing. So this first one will ask, how are you feeling? Fearful, anxious, surviving, or optimistic? And I'll give it just a few moments for everyone to think about it and submit a response here. Thank you. Thank you for participating. Give it just another moment. All right, I'm going to end this poll and share these results. Looks like optimism is in the lead. We always love to see that, but definitely have some feelings of anxiety and surviving in the audience. So hopefully some of our presentation today will help address some of those feelings. So I'm going to stop sharing this poll and launch that second poll. What is keeping you up at night? Finance, sales, marketing, scale, pivot, team, or surviving? And this one just tells us a little bit more about your current entrepreneurial needs so we can keep providing relevant content to all of you. So I'll give this a few moments. Awesome. We got folks from Missouri, Honolulu, Maryland, Argentina, Mexico City, California, South Carolina, Bora Bora, Antigua and Barbuda, England, India, Philippines, India, New Orleans, Virginia. Welcome, welcome. So awesome to have people from all over the globe. So I'm going to end this poll and share these results. Awesome. Looks like marketing is in the lead, but we do have needs all across the board here. So we will take all of this into account as we continue to develop programming, and thank you all for sharing. So I'm going to stop sharing this poll, and without any further delay, please join me in giving the warmest welcome to our special guest, David Crysler from the Crysler Club. David, it is such a pleasure to have you here. We're super excited for this, and I'm going to pass it right over to you.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Michelle. So excited to be here with everybody today, and so fun to see so many people from across the globe joining in for today's session. So we will jump right into the session today. And this is going to be an interactive session. And we also had some questions that came in to us as you all registered. So want a chance to address those as well. As Michelle said, there's going to be some Q&A at the end of this to get all of your questions answered. So today is all about supercharging your operations with continuous improvement. And I have one promise to you today, and that is to show you how continuous improvement can supercharge your operations and help you to create sustainable business growth. And we're going to do that by talking about three things today. Number one, the power of strategic planning. Number two, a cycle of continuous improvement that you can use in your business. And number 3, turning a good business into a great business. And as I mentioned, this is going to be a pretty interactive session. So I've got some questions for you to participate in via chat and the Q&A. So I'd love if you can jump in with those when we get to them. And the other thing I'm going to say is you're going to want to make sure that you stick around to the very end, because I've got a couple of resources that I will be passing along to you, free to you, that will help you take what you learned today and actually put it into action in your business. I know sometimes when I come to things like this, it's a lot of great information, but it can be challenging to actually take that and make it actionable for your business. So that is my promise to you today. So let's get into it. First things first, strategic planning versus trial and error. Now, I know that everybody in the audience has heard of both of these things, but my question to you is, and I'd love if you could put it in the chat, which one do you think actually gets you to achieving your goals faster? Strategic planning or trial and error? And you don't have to type out the whole thing. You can just put in strategic planning, SP, T&E. Love it. Love it. Looks like a lot of strategic planning in there. I love it. This is my kind of crowd today. So a lot of strategic planning. A lot of folks are thinking that trial and error is a great method to move the needle in our business. But like so many of you, I think that strategic planning is actually gives us permission to experiment in and around our business. And it is one of the things that helps us actually move the needle and get to our goals faster. Trial and error is great when we are thinking about things from a short-term perspective, but the reality of it is too often we are thinking about things from a reactive standpoint. And for me, strategic planning allows me to move from that reactive standpoint to the proactive standpoint, where I'm looking down the road and I am looking at both the short-term and the long-term perspective of what we are trying to do. So being able to balance those two things, and again, making the move from being reactive in our business and being worried about, how we're going to pay that next bill, or how we're going to cover payroll, or what new product we're going to launch. And going about it from a strategic planning standpoint allows us to answer all of those questions in a very methodical way. And again, some people look at that as, well, it's too rigid, it's inflexible. I need the ability to move faster. And depending on the cycle that you're putting that in, and I recommend doing a strategic planning review on a quarterly cycle, half of year or annual at the very most. But ideally, you want that on a quarterly basis, so you're constantly reevaluating the things that are driving your business forward, and changing or eliminating the things that are not doing that for you. Right. So the other big key with strategic planning versus trial and error for me is the ability to engage people across the organization. And what this generally looks like for people is, working towards that strategic vision versus kind of flavor of the month initiative. And I would ask the question, how many of you out there before starting your entrepreneurial journey or being where you're at today, how many of you have worked in an organization or for a particular leadership team where it felt like, every month we were starting something new, everything was, being reset. There was a lot of unpredictability in the process flows and the responsibilities and the tasks that were given to you on kind of any given basis. So feel free to throw that in the chat if you've ever felt like that. And the big key here is looking at it, in your own business. And again, This can apply even if you're a one-person business, because as you start to expand and maybe as you start to bring on a virtual assistant, maybe it's not even somebody that's directly in and around your team, but you want to be thinking about these things. How am I going to communicate the vision of what we are trying to do? And so it becomes a strategic vision, a strategic plan, and we are not just starting some sort of new short-term initiative that doesn't really help us move the needle and keep all of our team members aligned on this strategic vision. The other factor that that I talk about when it comes to the strategic planning is your resource allocation and the ability to allocate resources in kind of two different ways. I've got them highlighted here on the screen. Number one, with planned spending or your budgeting process. What does that look like? Anticipating things that are coming at you and anticipating opportunities that you may need additional capital for, or that you need to plan for next quarter, next half, next year, based on where your business is at today. The other part of this is your capacity and utilization planning. Sometimes from an operational standpoint, you'll hear the term S&OP or sales and operations planning. Sometimes you hear the terminology S&OE, sales and operational execution, which is the second half of the planning cycle. And, from my perspective, as you get to know me a little bit better, you'll learn I'm a pretty simple person. And so it doesn't matter to me if we necessarily call it S&OP. What we're really talking about is, from a strategic standpoint, understanding the things that are coming our way so we can plan for them appropriately. And again, not be in a reactionary mindset when those things hit. Because if you see an opportunity come your way and you think that opportunity is going to land in Q4 or Q1 of next year, now all of a sudden we can start to plan for those events. We can get our resources prepared. We can go out and seek additional capital, whatever we have to do to ensure that we're able to allocate the resources that we need to execute on that and take advantage of that opportunity. Those are all things that strategic planning allows us to do as compared to that trial and error method. And again, kind of last point on the trial and error method is really, again, just to reiterate the fact that just because you think that you're testing something out, it will move the needle faster for you. Ultimately, when you don't have things documented, that you can come back and refine that plan and understand what actions were helping you move closer to the goal and what actions were limiting you from moving towards the goal. That is the big takeaway in terms of why we want to steer clear of the trial and error method. So again, so excited to see so many people that are on board with this. So moving right along as we jump into what does a sustainable business growth structure actually look like? When we take everything away from our businesses, it really comes down to these core three elements. You've got sales and marketing, ops and fulfillment, finance, IT, and admin. So, we've got to earn the business. We've got to deliver on the promises that we've made while we've been out there promoting and selling our products and services. And the third leg of that stool is kind of everything else, right? Everything else that needs to happen in order to support the business. And when we're thinking about each one of these particular areas in terms of a sustainable structure, what we really want to be thinking about are the systems underneath each one of these buckets that will ultimately support the sustainable growth that you all are after for your businesses. So I want to ask the question and get a pulse from the room. So feel free to type this into the chat. But what is a business system to you? What is the meaning of a business system to you all? And again, feel free to drop those answers into the chat. We'll just give a couple of minutes. all the steps it takes to make a sale, the process in which you manage your operations, something that automates a process, supports the functional areas of a business. How do you operate your business? Yeah, great. I love this. You guys are on top of things. I love this. System to me is when all the departments are in sync. Accountability, great. Processes, procedures, tools, technology, all the resources working together. Yeah, I love it. We are in sync today, my friends. So when I take a look at what a business system is, my definition is that it is comprised of four key pillars, elements, whatever you'd like to call them. And that is planning, people, process, and I put brackets, sometimes technology. And the reason that I put sometimes technology is because very often when people think systems, they equate systems only to technology. And again, while systems can certainly tap into technology, technology is really at its highest level just a tool that we can utilize to execute processes. So when I think about what systems are, they are created through planning and people, but they're made up of a series of processes that again may or may not include technology. So where this ends up getting us into trouble a lot of times as business leaders is how often have you come into a situation where you are unhappy with some particular results? That could be anything from, order entry or something to do with customer fulfillment. And so we start to look at maybe a new piece of technology, maybe a new piece of software, because this particular software does this particular task better or differently. And what we want to be mindful of is what are the processes behind that technology? So what are the tools? What are the resources? How are we having the people that are executing those processes? What support are we giving them outside of that tool or technology to be able to execute on those processes? And when I have conversations with business leaders, that is not only where I tend to start, but generally 9 times out of 10, that's where the answer lies. Because as you start to look at technology, you could kind of think about it from a home improvements, a great analogy here, right? There's a bunch of different brands of tape measures. There's a bunch of different brands of hammers. But at the end of the day, if you need to pound in a nail, you're going to grab a hammer. It doesn't necessarily matter if it's a Craftsman or some other type of brand name. If you're looking for a hammer, then most hammers will suffice. And when I think about technology and process and how those two things interact in a business setting, I look at them the very same way. Technology is about writing and reading transactions, and the processes are about supplying those transactions and then doing something with the output of those transactions. So when we simplify technology to its kind of highest level, that is where we get into the differentiator between what is Ben, great comment there. Some hammers are far better at solving particular problems than others. And there is certainly some truth to that. So I appreciate that comment. But again, when we look at technology at that highest level, by and large, the transactions that are getting written are the same. So we want to dial in, we want to look at, what went into that process flow with your planning people processes in order to pick the most appropriate technology to ultimately execute. And the reason I want to spend a little bit of time on that is because we're going to dive into each one of those three, legs of the stool in terms of a sustainable structure, mostly around operations today. Even though I know that the poll question, some folks are struggling with their sales and marketing efforts in some other areas a bit outside of operations. But again, the things that we're talking about today can certainly be applied in many of those areas as well. So let's get into that. With the first leg of the stool being sales and marketing. And again, when we're thinking about this, these are all the activities, all of the process flows, all of the systems that we need to develop customer relationships and ultimately earn the business. So again, there's a lot of subcategories to this, but at its highest level, we want to be thinking about sales and marketing from a systems perspective of, what does it take to develop those relationships? What does it take to understand not just our sales process, not just our marketing process? How do we, build that relationship on an ongoing basis? How do we understand where somebody is at in our buying cycle? How do we understand what products or services that they are interested in? How do we understand, where the conversation started in terms of, those first initial contacts to how we can develop a better relationship to ultimately build greater and longer lifetime value across our customer database. So that is what the sales and marketing kind of leg is all about. Again, I don't want to spend a lot of time in there because we're really focused on operations today. So let's get into that. And again, when we are talking about operations and fulfillment, this is everything that goes into delivering on the promise that we made in our sales and marketing efforts, right? So every system that we need to be able to ultimately satisfy that customer demand. And again, depending on what type of business you have, if you have a product-centric business that you are, let's say, in a manufacturing environment, or you are in a service-based type of business, these categories, the actual process flow, some of the technology that you're going to ultimately implement, the systems that you, from a detail perspective, ultimately use, all of those things will be impacted based on the type of business that you have. But the things you really want to be thinking about are, how are we going to produce the thing that, we've gone out there and sold? If we're not producing it because we're not a product-centric business, or maybe we are a product-centric business, but we are not in the manufacturing setting, that would be the procurement or purchasing, right? How are we going to source the goods that we ultimately resell to our customers? Same thing on a service-based business, right? My business is a service-based business, but I have these things to consider too. What systems am I going to use to support fulfilling the request that my customers have? So I need to be thinking about this just like a product-centric business as well. How am I going to develop those processes so that we can ensure consistent customer experiences? And again, ultimately working our way to the point of building greater lifetime value with our customers, building better relationships, selling them multiple products or multiple services, and having those long-standing repeat cycle and customer relationships that are being built. The other aspect of this is our supply chain. And supply chain means different things to different people. For me, supply chain is really about the internal workings that we have throughout our operations, but it can just as easily be the external things that are happening as well. So we talked about the product-centric business that maybe has to source their material because they are not a manufacturer. So from a supply chain consideration, we need to have systems in place. We need to have processes in place that allow us to maintain those vendor relationships and that allow us to be able to deliver our products to our customers ultimately and have full visibility of all of those transactions and the things that are happening all the way from, again, that first initial interaction on the sales and marketing cycle through order entry. Maybe your business has to do some custom cost estimating or something like that. So part of that process through the fulfillment, external back out to the customer. Quality. This is another key area when we talk about operations and what it takes, what systems it takes to ensure consistency. Again, applying both to product-based and service-based businesses. Take my business. I have to be mindful to make sure that the information that I'm delivering on a consistent basis meets the quality standards, meets the expectations of what my customers are expecting to learn and accomplish when they work with me. Same thing in your business, regardless of if it's a service-based business or a product-based business. And the last part of this is having some contingency planning in place. Again, talking about back to the strategic planning being proactive versus reactive. Far too often, we are waiting for things to happen to us and reacting to those things that have just happened to us instead of thinking about what can go wrong in this particular scenario. So again, regardless of if we are a service-based business or a product-based business, if we're a product-based business and we are a manufacturer, what are we going to do if this product line goes down? If we're a product-based business and we are sourcing our goods that we ultimately resell, do we have any backup vendors that we could utilize to get this same product from, that in the event of a catastrophic failure with this one vendor, we can back up with another vendor? Service-based business, what are the contingency plans of not being able to deliver on the services that we've agreed to and promised to for our client base? So all of these are things that that will ultimately impact smooth operations, and again, ultimately help you to build sustainable growth for your business. The final piece of this, again, is everything else that we need to support the business. So when I'm thinking about finance, IT, admin, we want to be thinking about our enterprise management, kind of what's the overall, not just strategic plan and vision, but what are the systems, what kind of technology, what kind of process flows do we have in place to be able to look at those things and allocate our resources appropriately? And there's a lot of different layers of detail that we could dig into that. But again, not that is for a different presentation. Same thing on the financial management aspect. How are we handling our accounting transactions? What technology are we utilizing? What kind of process flows do we have in side of our financial management to be able to plan appropriately, and again, allocate resources appropriately and understand what our capital needs are, and so on and so forth. Same thing for the information management and the admin side. How are we supporting our teams? How are we helping them to develop? How are we finding, talent? How are we onboarding and training that talent? How are we maintaining all of our IT infrastructure? Is that an outsource? Is that something we handle internally? All of these are the everything else bucket that ends up going into the systems that it takes to create sustainable long-term growth for our business. The learning management system, this is one of the questions that was submitted. It tacks on to that. And the question was really about how do we build out standard operating procedures within our business? That goes beyond just operations. That is really encompassing all aspects of your business. But when I think about one of the key systems that we need, regardless of kind of where we start from a systemization perspective, it is this one, right? Because everything is back to that process flow. Everything is back to how do we do this thing that we need to do? And as you start to expand beyond yourself, beyond your capabilities, again, whether that's with existing team members, whether that's with a virtual assistant, what have you, even for yourself, sometimes it is good to have those reference points to understand, how can I do this consistently? How can I make sure that I don't miss a step? That's where the learning management system comes into place. And the two key kind of aspects of this are being able to have process documentation, being able to have audit records and training records as your team expands and as your business scales and grows. And the other note that I have on here is, again, I'm a big fan of simplicity and to start where we're at. So when we're talking about, well, how do we actually go through and accomplish some of these things? Start simply, right? I put a couple of tools in here. You could use Notion, Airtable, Excel, Google Sheets. Some of my favorite ways to document process is with, with my iPhone, right? Or your Android phone. You can use tools in the Chrome browser like Tango to record steps. You could use a tool like Loom to go and record yourself on a video just like this with screen capture. Don't let the tools either intimidate you or stop you from starting to create these, these resources, right? Because ultimately, the first initial wave of documentation, you just need to get it down on paper. Then you can worry about going through some cycles of improvement and looking for ways to increase your efficiency with those things. The other two key aspects of any kind of learning management system, and again, this is where I see a lot of people fail, but we have to make it accessible. That's why I love some of the tools that I called out in here, because they're SaaS products. They're easily available on multiple devices, desktop, mobile, tablet, and they're very searchable. That is the other key aspect that I really love with these tools. You got to make things easily accessible and searchable. So I did see a great note in here in terms of learning management system should not be just the how-to, but also the why and what are the ramifications. And couldn't agree more. Matter of fact, you teed that up great, Ben, for my next slide, which is why, what, and how. And when it comes to setting the strategic vision, making any type of change management, right? These are the questions that need to be focused on: why, what, and how. And it is in that particular order for a very specific reason. I have been in many operations leadership roles for many years of my life. And I can say from firsthand experience of leading teams that when I was setting strategic visions, when I was working on some sort of change and management initiative, it was very easy for me to jump into, how are we going to do this? Because I'd been thinking about the why and the what for way, way too long. So it was very easy for me to jump as a leader, for me to jump into the how we were going to accomplish that. And what I learned over time is that, the people I was trying to get on board with that, they hadn't known what the why or the what was going to be. So that started to, kind of turn people off and get people more worried about, how is this going to impact me? What are the things I need to worry about? And so we want to be very mindful of starting with the why, as why do we want to do this? And talking to the team about that, why are we trying to increase our product quality? Why are we trying to, increase our revenue for this particular product or with this particular customer? Beyond the why, as Ben alluded to, we have to be able to speak to the what. And the what is really about what's going to be impacted. And when you think about this, you want to be thinking about this from your team's perspective. And the first thing that people are always worried about is themselves. And so it comes from a good place, but you have to be prepared for that and speak to, what do I think is going to be impacted? How is this team member? How is this department? How are their responsibilities going to be impacted? And what do I expect to have happen? So you can speak to those things. And the third part of all of this is, once you get through the why and the what, is to be able to tap into all of those folks to actually go and say, how can we do this, right? Because that is the meat behind everything. And giving them an opportunity to have input in that is really going to help you move the needle, both towards your strategic plan and any other type of change management initiative that you are going after. So I see I'm getting long-winded. I'm going to have to speed things up here. So cycle of continuous improvement. This is the third part of what we really want to talk about today. And again, there's a couple of widely accepted frameworks that are out there in terms of what you might find. If you do a Google search, you'll probably find Plan, Do, Check, Act, PDCA. That is generally associated with continuous improvement at a whole. The other thing you'll generally find is what is called a DMAIC methodology, and that is mostly associated with Lean Six Sigma or Six Sigma, and that is define, measure, analyze, improve, and control. Both of those frameworks were originally created based on improving product quality in product-centric businesses. And so for that reason, I found it really helpful to develop my own framework, which is what I want to share with you today. And that is very simply plan, execute, review, revise, repeat. And part of the reason I wanted to develop my own framework was really around this thought that I wanted a framework that was easily applied in many situations across the organization. So if we were working on a quality initiative, I could apply the framework. If we were working on strategic planning and strategic visions, I could apply the framework and put it into this cycle. So everything we were doing worked off of this cycle of continuous improvement. So step number one, plan, right? We got to get it down on paper. That is the biggest hurdle with many business leaders out there. The plan lives in their mind. It becomes very challenging to share with people throughout your organization. So let's get it down on paper. Let's answer the why, what, and how, and make sure that we do it in that particular order. Beyond just the plan and getting it written down, we've got to execute, right? So let's run the plan. Let's track our actions. So as we are tracking our actions and as we are starting to get to a point where we can take a look at, hey, what's happening? That's the review. What's working? What's not working? We want to be able to understand both of those things to say what actions are driving us forward, what actions are holding us back. And once we understand both of those things, then we can revise, right? How are we going to do more of the things that are driving us forward? How can we eliminate or ultimately remove the things that are not? And finally, we want to be able to repeat that cycle. And again, no matter if we are talking about applying this to strategic planning, or we are applying this to something very specific from a process improvement standpoint, we can apply this exact same framework and keep us into this cycle of improvement to move the needle forward for our business. Okay, so turning a good business into a great business, there are really three key things here. Number one, creating sustainable growth takes time. I don't think this is a big secret, but it is certainly a fact that I have experienced firsthand. Number two, any type of change that we're going after takes time, right? Again, no big secret here, but I want you to know from lived experience, this stuff does take time to not only implement, but to see improvement. The third big thing, and really the secret behind all of it, is this constant mission to seek incremental improvement for whatever it is that we are working towards. Those quick wins lead to more momentum, and the cycle just continues. So I want to share just a very quick story here with you all. And it's really part of my backstory. It is how I was able to, develop these things and learn them firsthand. This is all learned firsthand experience, many years of making poor decisions and learning from those decisions. So I want to tell you about a facility that I was responsible to take over. This was quite a few years ago, back in the early 2000s. And this was my first experience being a newly appointed general manager. I was going to be taking over for a retiring general manager. And this facility that I inherited significantly declining sales. This facility was doing about a third of the revenue that it once did at its kind of highest and peak point. Profitability was not much better. Profitability levels were pretty dismal. So as you can imagine, the people that were actually at that facility, they're pretty low morale. And in fact, people thought that I was actually there to shutter the plant, to close the plant down. And, being on the ground, kind of seeing what was happening. It was a very cool plant. We did a lot of really unique products there. Not a lot of competition that was out there, definitely competitors, but not a lot. But the other factor was this was a business that was in a traditionally declining product segment. This was a printing manufacturing company. And traditional printed products. So, the digital world, right, that is replacing some of those products. So we had a lot of hurdles that we were looking to cross. And one of the first, impactful decisions that I had to make, that was an extremely challenging decision, was I actually had to go in and lay off about a third of the workforce. And this was obviously something that, decision that was not made lightly. It was, on the fact of people thought I was there to close the business. This was obviously not going to help my mission in terms of turning the culture around and getting people excited about participating in the change and the things that were coming. But the reality of it was, if I didn't do that cut, that plant would have closed. And so I cut deeper than I wanted to, but I didn't want to have to continue to cut jobs. And so when I made the cut and all of it was over, I had a plant meeting and I was able to tell people, look, I understand everybody's worried. I understand, the situation that we're in, but, my promise to you is that I'm going to do everything possible that this was the last layoff that we had to do at this facility. And here's, how I see things kind of moving forward. And it was in about 3 years' time, utilizing the foundations framework, utilizing our, continuous improvement cycle, constantly evaluating what our strategic plan and vision were, and through, increased communication, engagement, and participation with the team. In about 3 years, we added millions of dollars in revenue. We added hundreds of thousands of dollars in additional profitability. We had the best quality record amongst our competitors in the space. We not only never had to do another layoff, we hired additional people. We grew our product line to include new products that we had never created at that facility. And, as kind of the cap to all of that, we were awarded with a pretty prestigious award, which was the Most Improved Facility Award for that particular business unit. And I attribute it to all of the hard work that the people did that were in that facility. Because again, to go from what I said, the brink of closure to a triumphant return, was really on the back of all of the work that we did together, but really doing the work that we're talking about, putting in those foundational systems, communicating what the strategic vision was, and constantly looking for those incremental improvements to make our, today a little bit better than yesterday, but not quite as good as tomorrow. That is the story I wanted to share with you all. And it's one I'm very proud to have been a part of throughout my career. So I promised you a couple of resources to help you take the things that I've talked about today and actually apply them in your business. So this is the first thing. This is our Foundations Framework guidebook. It's a 12-page guidebook that walks you through our cycle of continuous improvement, but from a 30-day strategic improvement plan perspective. So it walks you through the plan, execute, review, revise, repeat on basically a 5-week schedule in order to help you think about some areas for improvement within your business from a strategic planning cycle. And so everybody that's registered with us today is going to get a copy of this. And as an added bonus for all of you that have stuck out and participated live here, I have a mini course that goes along with this, which is a multi-part video series. And I'm going to be giving a coupon code to everybody that has participated live here with us so that you can get the course that goes along with the guidebook and really help you move the needle in your business. So hopefully you guys can take advantage of that. And The second bonus that I am going to give to everybody that is participating here is a invitation to our closed and private community of other business leaders and entrepreneurs who are doing the same things that you guys are. It's a group of like-minded, amazing folks that are, seeking excellence and really striving to grow their business in a sustainable way. So that is it for me today. I'd love to open it up to some questions here. We did have a couple of questions that were submitted. So again, if you've got anything, I'd love to hear that from you.
Awesome, Dave. Thank you so much for these incredible insights. That was just an incredible overview. And yeah, we have some questions, so let's jump right in. If you're in the audience and you have a question for Dave, make sure to drop it in that Q&A box. We'll try to get to as many as possible. So early on, you emphasized the importance of strategic planning. And so is there a framework of thinking that entrepreneurs can apply to proactively align that stakeholder engagement and resource allocation, those strategies with their vision in the short term and long term?
Yeah, there's sure, you can kind of find a bunch of different frameworks that are out there. As part of, our foundations framework, we kind of go into more of a business blueprint, which is that kind of strategic framework to be able to develop a plan like that. But again, when we think about what's really going to move the needle and how to put, action behind the vision, it really comes down to the detailed work to say, here's the goal I'm going after. And we want to make sure that is, written in a SMART goal or something similar to that, and developing the task list behind that, the BHAG, right? The big, hairy, audacious goal to be able to actually move the needle. And that is what's gonna help people allocate the correct resources and make sure that people are staying on task with those resources. And again, I say it, even if you're a one-person show, right? It's going to keep me on task as a business owner or entrepreneur and help me understand, what KPIs are really going to drive this forward, right? So if I'm talking about, I think early on, the poll question was around sales and marketing, right? So let's use that as a quick example. So if I am struggling from a sales perspective and I need to go out there and I need to get some sales, right? What are the KPIs? We know what the BHAG is, right? Grow sales. Okay. And we could get real specific with that, but let's start there. Grow sales. All right. Well, what does that mean? What are the activities I need to do? How many outreaches do I need to have? How many conversations do I need to have? How many leads will get me to that number of conversations on any given daily basis? And then you start to develop those task lists that go behind those, those milestones, if you will, and that becomes your daily routine. That becomes your metric. That becomes how you develop a process to actually move the needle and not just say, I really got to do something to get some more sales out here.
Right. So it sounds like you're kind of referring to the planning aspect of the continuous improvement process. So how can entrepreneurs kind of, when they're early on in their business journey and really still trying to figure out, their strategy, how can they kind of organize their thoughts, bring their team together and kind of inspire action among the business as a whole in that planning process?
Yeah, you can start with there's a one-page business plan template that you can follow, right? Too often, and that's kind of the framework that I generally follow. Too often when we're thinking about that strategic planning perspective, people kind of immediate thought is, I got to have this, long form, either pitch deck or, something like that, right? In terms of what a formal business plan would be. And what is missing with all of those are the action steps behind them, right? So it can certainly help you get your mind around, what market segment you're in, and, kind of some generalizations around all of the things that you need. But at the end of the day, what really moves the needle is action. And the only way to get to action is to define your goal very specifically and to have steps that are going to move the needle towards that, right? So when we think about the plan, execute, review, revise, repeat, when you start with that one thing, if it's, grow sales, then you have to be able to understand what are the couple of actions that I need to try in order to do that. When we try, we execute, then we can review, revise, repeat. If, doing cold outreach isn't the thing that moves the needle, you have to ask yourself, well, is it because I didn't do enough? Or is it because, I did enough and this isn't effective? I need to do something else, so I think too often people can think there's, the magic, formula for it. And it's really not. In all of my 25 years of experience of, growing businesses, whether that was for somebody else or on my own, it has always been the ability to define actions beyond just the goal. And the rallying cry around that is getting people together and saying, how can we do this? Right.
Yeah.
I know I want to grow sales. And if you're surrounded by a team, in your business, then you can start to say, how can we actually achieve this? And you start to tap into that collective brain power of the people that are actually doing the work.
Love it. That's super helpful. And so in kind of thinking about your business systems and supporting a sustainable structure, in carefully evaluating the processes, what variables might entrepreneurs analyze to determine the appropriate business systems for their unique business needs?
Yeah. So great question. And it's kind of multifaceted. And what I would say is everybody has a process today, right? So no process is a process. So everybody today, with whatever we're working towards achieving, there is a process in place. Where I always start is to document what that is. It can be kind of long form detailed. It could be a map. You could use a blank wall and sticky notes. That's one of my favorite ways to do this. And then as you relate those processes to the technology that is going to execute them, you have to be asking yourself, is this something that I need to automate? And we automate for two very specific reasons, right? One, to increase efficiency. Two, to minimize the amount of errors that can happen. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
There is no other reason to automate a particular process. In some cases, I would make the argument that you could probably eliminate some of what you're doing before you try to automate what you're doing, right? And the
Sure.
only way to get clarity around that is to get it on paper somewhere, or get it up on a wall, or if you really love computers, then use, a tool like Lucid, or, any one of a number of things to just map it so you can see it. Because when you can see it, then you can explain it, articulate it, get other people in that same vision and mindset and say, man, this seems like it's really complicated. Don't you think? Like, how can we eliminate some of this? How can we automate some of this? Those are the questions. And so don't start with, I've got this tool I really want to use, and then figure out how the process is going to work with the tool. Start with the process, then think about, okay, which tools would be appropriate? Because you might find you already have a tool that could do this thing. That's not a whole nother thing that you have to integrate, right?
Totally.
It's just an added feature that you could take advantage of. So like a great example of that would be like a CRM, right? Like HubSpot or something like that, where, boy, I've got, my client journey is already in this thing. Boy, maybe it does email marketing too. Maybe I should investigate what my email marketing processes are like, and maybe I can implement email marketing in this tool versus having another tool.
Right. Yeah, no, I love that. And I love that you mentioned automation. And I'm wondering if you have any other thoughts here, because we have a couple entrepreneurs kind of wondering about, in a situation where you are a one-person team, how might you kind of manage the cycle of continuous improvement, and like what other resources might entrepreneurs be able to tap into to kind of support that process?
Yeah. If you're, a one person show, the best kind of mindset and activities, my opinion, that you can get in is to do that strategic planning on a quarterly basis and kind of go through and ask those questions of yourself. So it doesn't become so much about disseminating the vision across the team or the organization, but it
Sure.
very much becomes aligning yourself with the activities that you need to perform on any given daily, weekly, monthly basis to actually move the needle. Because what ends up happening as entrepreneurs is, especially kind of the one person band, right, is you're wearing so many hats, you have so many things that you've got going
Mhm.
on, that you end up being the person running back and forth spinning the plates, and you are busy, but you are not productive.
Yeah.
And so what strategic planning allows you to do is to highlight those things that you know are going to move the needle in your business. And for most early stage entrepreneurs, that is sales. It is figuring out what your sales process is, figuring out how to get more lead flow into your business, and then figuring out how to take that lead flow and convert that into sales. And so if you're spending your time doing a bunch of other things, you're probably not allocating the right amount of time to activities like that. And in my opinion, the only way to get to those answers is to go through this strategic planning and be thinking about, what are the activities that are going to drive the needle forward for me. And that is different, than, let's say, a startup that is, venture backed, that has a bit more runway, versus a bootstrapped, entrepreneur who is trying to grow something from nothing, or a side hustle, or any one of those types of things.
Totally.
So I would make the argument in the venture backed as well, but they generally have a longer runway and get to spend a bit more money on figuring it out than folks doing the bootstrap method.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. Awesome. I think we have time for one more
Yeah.
question. And you briefly mentioned Lean Six Sigma, and we have an entrepreneur in the audience wondering if you had any other insight about like how might adopting a project management type mindset um, can strategically benefit entrepreneurs in their endeavor for continuous improvement.
Yeah. So, and I think this kind of aligns with one of the questions too that was submitted early on, in terms of, what's the difference between like a PMO, right, which is a project management office, and kind of generally operations. And at a high level, they're very similar, right? When I think about operations, yes, you are doing a lot of project management because you have kind of this strategic vision that you've lined out. You've got underneath that strategic vision, you have all of these different types of initiatives that we're working towards and driving forward. So that's where a lot of the similarities kind of come between somebody, let's say, in like an operations management or operations leadership role, and like a PMO type of,
Yeah.
office, responsibility. Now, what I would caution many people on, and it's not because I don't like Lean Six Sigma. I love it, have a lot of respect for it. But where I see a lot of people kind of go sideways is you get too wrapped up into a particular framework or
Mhm.
methodology, and it becomes all about that and not about the results. So,
Uh,
I don't care if you don't want to use the framework that I've lined out and you feel more comfortable using DMAIC, or you feel more comfortable using plan, do, check, act. That part to me is not nearly as important as kind of the concept retention of what are we trying to instill with people. And I see Six Sigma as the same way. Six Sigma is very successful in very process and system mature organizations. And unless your business is out of the growth phase and into the maturity phase, I would say that 99 out of 100 businesses are not mature enough from a process and systemization standpoint to adopt successfully Lean Six Sigma. So now, are there exceptions to that? 100%. If you're a smaller company in aerospace, if you're a smaller company in defense, right, there are certainly exceptions to that rule. But I would say by and large, those are the big differentiators. And that's the stuff that I'd be cautious to tap into, because, you will find lots of people that say, this is what you need. And, that's how that's how consultants end up getting a bad rap because, yes, this is exactly what you need when in fact, your business is not process mature enough to adopt those practices. You don't have the system complexity from an ERP standpoint or financial governance standpoint to support the data required to drive those types of decision making. So,
right. Yeah, no, I think that distinction is important and just that emphasis on results versus methodology. So
yeah.
Awesome. We are just out of time, but Dave, if you
Yeah.
had one key takeaway that you wanted to leave with the audience, what would that be?
Yeah, for me, it is all about the cycle of improvement. And again, from my perspective, that's plan, execute, review, revise, repeat. Look for a framework that you feel comfortable with, but be thinking about every aspect of your business through that lens and seeking incremental improvement. That's the stuff that drives the needle. It takes time. There is no shortcut. Stay patient, continue to learn, and continue growing your business.
Awesome. Dave, thank you so much for these incredible insights on behalf of the NASDAQ Entrepreneurial Center and everyone here today. We're just so thankful that you joined us.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me.
Awesome. And to our audience, we would love for you to join us again for upcoming webinars, which you can view using that link in the chat. And thank you all so much for joining us today. We look forward to welcoming you back online with us soon.